I thought my Mother's Day surprise was ruined when my son's mother-in-law showed up in a ball gown, but that was just the beginning. By midnight I was facing a crisis that no one in my family will ever forget. If you think you know how this ends, think again, because the real shock comes at the very last minute. Mother's Day morning arrived with a kind of hope I hadn't felt in years. The sun was streaming through the curtains, and for once I didn't have to be the one making breakfast for everyone else. My son Carter had called the night before, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Mum, I've booked a table at Le Magnifique for us. Dress up, it's going to be special." Le Magnifique? The fanciest place in town, the kind of restaurant you only see in glossy magazines. I'd never been, but I'd always dreamed of it. I practically floated out of bed, my heart light and my mind already racing with possibilities. What would I wear? Should I go with the classic little black dress, or maybe that new floral number I'd been saving for a special occasion? I decided to make a day of it. After all, how often does a mother get to be pampered by her grown son? I started with a long hot shower, letting the steam work its magic on my tired muscles. I even used the fancy lavender body wash I usually save for guests. After breakfast, just a simple bowl of oatmeal, because I didn't want to feel too full for the feast ahead. I set up my little home spa. I put on that face mask that makes me look like a ghost, the one that promises to erase 10 years in 20 minutes. I laughed at my reflection, thinking how Carter used to run screaming from the bathroom when he was little and saw me in it. I could almost hear his voice. "Mom, you look like a monster!" Well, this monster was going to look fabulous tonight. While the mask worked its magic, I soaked my feet and gave myself a pedicure. I even painted my toenails a cheerful coral pink, just in case my shoes slipped off under the table. I moved on to my fingernails, carefully shaping and painting them a soft, elegant nude. I hadn't spent this much time on myself in years, and it felt wonderful. By noon I was feeling like a new woman. I put on my favorite playlist, some old Motown, a little Carole King, even a bit of ABA for good measure, and danced around the living room while I picked out my outfit. I settled on the little black dress after all. It was classic, flattering, and made me feel confident. I paired it with a string of pearls Carter had given me for my 50th birthday, and a pair of low heels that were just dressy enough without threatening to break my ankles. I laid everything out on the bed and took a step back, admiring the ensemble. Not bad for 58, I thought with a smile. The afternoon stretched ahead of me, and I found myself growing more and more excited. I called my sister, just to share the news. "You'll never guess where Carter is taking me tonight," I said, unable to keep the pride out of my voice. "Le Magnifique!" Can you believe it? We spent a good half hour reminiscing about all the Mother's Days we'd spent together over the years, some wonderful, some disastrous, all memorable in their own way. "You deserve this, Elaine," she said before hanging up. "Enjoy every minute." I took her advice to heart. I spent the next hour doing my makeup, taking my time with each step. I even watched a few YouTube tutorials to try out a new eyeshadow technique. It didn't turn out quite like the video, but I decided it was good enough. I spritzed on my favorite perfume, just a touch, not too much, because I didn't want to overpower the delicate aromas of whatever gourmet meal awaited me. I checked my reflection one last time, smoothing down a stray hair and giving myself a little pep talk. "You look beautiful," I whispered. "You're gonna have a wonderful night." By 5 p.m. I was ready. I slipped into my dress, fastened the pearls around my neck, and stepped into my heels. I looked in the mirror and hardly recognized myself. The woman staring back at me looked happy, confident, and just a little bit glamorous. I was practically floating as I made my way to the living room, clutching my little black clutch and humming along to the music still playing softly in the background. Just as I was about to put on my shoes, the door creaked open. I turned, expecting to see Carter, maybe with a bouquet of flowers or a big grin on his face. Instead, I heard the unmistakable sound of high heels clicking on the hardwood floor. In walked Vivian, Carter's mother-in-law, wearing a ball gown that looked like it belonged on the red carpet. The dress was a deep, shimmering blue, covered in sequins that caught the light with every dramatic twirl she made. Her hair was piled high, not a strand out of place, and she wore a pair of diamond earrings that looked like they could pay off my mortgage. She paused in the doorway, struck a pose, and beamed at Carter, who was standing just behind her, looking like he'd been caught in a rainstorm of glitter. "Son-in-law, I'm ready for our dinner," Vivian announced, her voice ringing out with the kind of confidence that only comes from years of being the star of her own show. I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing. For a split second, I thought maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe she was just stopping by to say hello, or maybe she'd gotten the date wrong and thought she was going to a charity gala. But then I saw the way she looked at Carter, expectant and triumphant, and I realized with a sinking feeling that she was in fact ready for dinner, my dinner. I looked at Carter, hoping for some kind of explanation, a sheepish apology, or even a laugh to break the tension. Instead, he gave me a sidelong smile, the kind that used to mean he was up to something mischievous as a boy, but now just felt cold. "Mom, you thought it was for you," he said, his tone light, almost teasing, but with an edge that stung more than I cared to admit. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen in place. My mind raced back over the events of the day, the hours I'd spent getting ready, the excitement I'd felt, the pride I'd shared with my sister on the phone. All of it seemed to evaporate in an instant, replaced by a heavy, hollow ache in my chest. I wanted to argue, to demand an explanation, to ask why on earth he would let me believe the dinner was for me if it wasn't. But the words caught in my throat, tangled up with embarrassment and disappointment. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, and I knew if I tried to speak, my voice would crack. So instead, I did what so many of us have learned to do over the years. I smiled. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt, and I wished them a wonderful evening. You two have a great time, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Vivian didn't seem to notice my discomfort. She was too busy fussing with her clutch and checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. Carter gave me a quick, distracted hug, the kind you give when you're already thinking about something else. And then they were gone, the door closing behind them with a soft click that sounded, to me, like the final note of a sad song. I stood in the middle of the living room, still in my little black dress and pearls, feeling like a guest at my own party, who'd just been told the celebration was for someone else. I sank onto the couch, my hands folded in my lap, and stared at the empty room. The silence was deafening. I could still hear the echo of Vivian's laughter, the swish of her gown, the click of her heels on the hardwood floor. It was as if she'd left a trail of glitter and disappointment in her wake. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family, like you're the background music to someone else's main event? That's exactly how I felt. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just a mix-up, that maybe Carter had meant to include me, but got caught up in Vivian's enthusiasm. But the truth was, I felt crushed. I felt foolish for getting my hopes up, for spending all day getting ready, for believing that I could still be the center of my son's world, even for just one night. I thought about calling my sister again, but I didn't want to admit how hurt I was. I didn't want to hear the sympathy in her voice, or worse, the anger on my behalf. I just wanted to sit in the quiet and let myself feel whatever it was I was feeling. As the minutes ticked by, I tried to distract myself. I turned on the TV, flipping through channels without really seeing anything. I scrolled through my phone, looking at pictures of past Mother's Days, trying to remind myself that I'd had good times, that I was loved. But the ache in my chest wouldn't go away. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, Vivian's grand entrance, Carter's dismissive smile, the way the room seemed to shrink around me as they left. I wondered if I was being too sensitive, if I was making a mountain out of a molehill. But then I thought, no, it's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to want to be seen, to be celebrated, to be the one in the ball gown for once. I got up and poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. If tonight wasn't special, I didn't know what was. I sat back down on the couch, kicked off my heels, and took a long sip. The wine was smooth and rich, and for a moment, it warmed me from the inside out. I closed my eyes and let myself imagine what the night could have been: Carter and me, laughing over fancy appetizers, sharing stories, making new memories. But reality was what it was. I was alone and they were out there somewhere, probably sipping champagne and ordering the most expensive thing on the menu. I wondered if Carter would even think to bring me back a dessert, or if Vivian would let him. I wondered if he'd realize, even for a second, how much this night had meant to me, and how much it hurt to be left behind. As the evening wore on, I started to feel a little lighter. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was just the passage of time, but I began to see the humor in the situation. Only in my family, I thought, could Mother's Day turn into a red carpet event for the mother-in-law. I pictured Vivian holding court at Le Magnifique, dazzling the waiters with her stories, and I couldn't help but chuckle. Maybe next year, I'd show up in a tiara and see how she liked it. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to let this ruin my night. I put on some music, something upbeat and fun, and danced around the living room in my dress and pearls, just for me. I sang along at the top of my lungs, letting the music fill the empty spaces in my heart. I reminded myself that I was still here, still worthy, still capable of making my own joy. And as I twirled around the room, I realized that sometimes the best company you can have is yourself. I didn't know what the rest of the night would bring, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't invisible. Not to myself. And that, I decided, was worth celebrating. Little did I know the night was far from over, and the real drama was just about to begin. Fast forward to midnight, I'm in my pajamas, face cream on, watching reruns of Golden Girls when my phone starts ringing, and ringing, and ringing. It's Carter. Mom, I need $15,000 in cash right now. They won't let us leave the restaurant. $15,000. I nearly dropped the phone. Carter, are you trying to buy the restaurant or just dinner? I asked, half laughing, half panicking. He was frantic. Mom, please. Vivian is making a scene. She's yelling at the manager and people are staring. I'm begging you. Can you please bring the money? They won't let us leave until we pay the bill. I took a deep breath, trying to process what he was saying. The image of Vivian, resplendent in her sequined gown, causing a midnight spectacle at the city's most exclusive restaurant, was almost too much. Part of me wanted to laugh, but another part, the mother part, felt a familiar tug of worry. No matter how old your kids get, you never stop wanting to help them, to fix things, to swoop in and save the day. But $15,000, in cash, at midnight. I didn't even have that much in my checking account, let alone stuffed under my mattress. Carter, slow down, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What happened? How did the bill get so high? He let out a shaky breath. Vivian kept ordering the most expensive things on the menu. She wanted to try the tasting menu, the wine pairings, the caviar, the truffles, everything. I didn't want to say no, Mom. She kept saying it was a special occasion, and the waiter just kept bringing things. I thought my card would cover it, but when I tried to pay, it was declined. I called the bank, and they said there was suspicious activity, so they blocked it. Now the manager says we can't leave until we settle the bill. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache coming on. Carter, I don't have that kind of money. Even if I did, how would I get it to you at this hour? The banks are closed, and I'm not about to rob a convenience store for you. He was silent for a moment, and I could hear the muffled sounds of chaos in the background, Vivian's shrill voice, the clinking of glasses, the low murmur of other diners. Mom, please. He said again, his voice small and desperate. I don't know what to do. Vivian is threatening to call her lawyer. The manager is talking about calling the police. I'm so embarrassed. Can you just help me? I closed my eyes, torn between sympathy and exasperation. This was classic Carter, always trying to please everyone, always getting in over his head, and Vivian, with her flair for the dramatic, was only making things worse. I thought about all the times I'd bailed him out over the years, late-night calls from college, frantic requests for rent money, last-minute favors. I'd always come through, because that's what mothers do. But tonight, something in me shifted. Maybe it was the sting of being left out, or maybe it was just the absurdity of the situation, but I realized I didn't have to fix this for him. Not this time. Carter, I said, my voice calm but firm, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. I don't have that kind of money, and even if I did, I wouldn't be able to get it to you right now. You're going to have to figure this out on your own. There was a long pause, and I could hear the panic rising in his voice. But Mom, what am I supposed to do? They won't let us leave. Vivian is going to kill me? I almost felt sorry for him, but then I remembered the way he'd smiled at me earlier, the way he'd let me believe the dinner was for me, only to pull the rug out from under me. I thought about the hours I'd spent getting ready, the excitement I'd felt, the disappointment that had settled over me like a heavy blanket. Maybe it was petty, but I couldn't help feeling a little vindicated. Maybe this was the universe's way of teaching him a lesson. I'm sure you'll figure something out, I said, trying to inject a note of encouragement into my voice. Maybe Vivian can cover the bill, or maybe the restaurant will let you work it off in the kitchen. Either way, you're a grown man, Carter. It's time to start acting like one. He was silent again, and I could hear the weight of my words sinking in. For the first time, I didn't rush to fill the silence, didn't offer a solution or a way out. I just let him sit with it, let him feel the consequences of his actions. It wasn't easy. Every instinct in me wanted to swoop in and save him, to make everything better. But I knew deep down that this was something he needed to experience for himself. Okay, Mom, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll figure it out. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding, and sat back on the couch. The Golden Girls were still chattering away on the TV, but I barely heard them. I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, guilt, pride, and a little bit of sadness. I knew Carter would be okay. He was resourceful, and Vivian was nothing if not determined. They'd find a way out of their mess, one way or another. As I sat there, I realized that sometimes the best thing you can do for your children is to let them face the consequences of their choices. It's not easy, and it doesn't always feel good, but it's necessary. I took a deep breath, wiped the last of the face cream from my cheeks, and smiled to myself. Maybe this Mother's Day hadn't gone the way I'd planned, but in its own strange way, it had given me exactly what I needed, a reminder that I was stronger than I thought, and that sometimes, the best way to love your children is to let them stand on their own 2 feet. There's a certain satisfaction that comes with finally standing your ground, especially after a lifetime of being the one who smooths things over for everyone else. As I sat on my couch, the phone still warm in my hand from Carter's desperate midnight call, I felt a swirl of emotions. Guilt, yes, but also a deep, undeniable sense of vindication. For years I'd been the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who patched up every family squabble and bailed Carter out of every scrape. But tonight, as the clock ticked past midnight, and the echoes of Vivian's ball gown drama still lingered in my mind, I realized I was finally ready to let someone else clean up their own mess. When Carter had called, his voice trembling with panic, I could almost picture the scene at Le Magnifique. Vivian, resplendent in her sequin gown, gesticulating wildly at the mac tredu. Carter, red-faced and sweating, fumbling with his wallet as the other diners looked on in a mixture of curiosity and judgment. The absurdity of it all was almost too much. I'd spent the day pampering myself, believing I was the guest of honor, only to be left behind for a woman who treated every occasion like a red carpet event. And now, here they were stuck in a mess of their own making, looking to me for a rescue. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of motherly obligation pressing down on me. But instead of caving, I found myself smiling. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the glass of wine I'd sipped earlier, but I suddenly felt lighter than I had in ages. I thought about all the times I'd dropped everything to help Carter. Late-night phone calls from college, frantic requests for money, last-minute babysitting emergencies. I'd always said yes, always put his needs before my own. But tonight, something inside me shifted. I realized that sometimes the best way to love someone is to let them face the consequences of their choices. So, when Carter pleaded for help, I didn't rush to his aid. Instead, I let a little mischief creep into my voice and said, "Carter, I'd love to help, but I spent all my cash getting ready for our special dinner. Maybe ask Vivian. She looks like she can afford it." The silence on the other end of the line was almost comical. I could hear the gears turning in his head, the dawning realization that Mom wasn't going to swoop in and save the day this time. After a moment, he stammered, "Okay, Mom. I'll figure something out." I hung up, feeling a twinge of guilt. After all, no mother likes to see her child in distress, but mostly I felt a sense of sweet, hard-earned satisfaction. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about finally drawing a line, about reminding myself that I was more than just a safety net. I was a person with my own needs, my own boundaries, and yes, my own sense of humor. As I sat back on the couch, I let out a long, slow breath and allowed myself to laugh. Not a bitter laugh, but a genuine, belly-deep chuckle at the sheer ridiculousness of the situation. Sometimes life gives you lemons. Sometimes it gives you a blocked credit card and a ball gown. Either way, you've got to laugh. I thought about Vivian, probably still holding court at the restaurant, her voice rising above the clatter of silverware as she demanded to speak to the manager. I imagined Carter, trying to explain the situation, his face growing redder by the minute. The image was so vivid, so absurd, that I couldn't help but shake my head in amusement. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of freedom. I wasn't responsible for fixing everything. I didn't have to be the hero of someone else's story. I could just be me, imperfect, a little bit selfish, and perfectly content with that. I poured myself another glass of wine, kicked off my slippers, and settled back into the couch. The Golden Girls were still on, their laughter echoing through the room, and I found myself joining in. Maybe I hadn't gotten the fancy dinner I'd hoped for, but I'd gotten something even better, a reminder that I was stronger than I thought, and that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply letting go. As the night wore on, I thought about all the women I knew, friends, sisters, neighbors, who had spent their lives putting everyone else first. How many of us had been left out, overlooked, or taken for granted? How many times had we smiled through disappointment, swallowed our hurt, and carried on as if nothing was wrong? I realized that my story wasn't unique. It was the story of so many women who had given and given, only to find themselves alone at the end of the day. But tonight, I decided, was different. Tonight I chose myself. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in years. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and for once I didn't feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the world go by. I thought about calling Carter, checking in to see how he'd managed, but I decided to let him come to me. He needed to learn that I wasn't always going to be there to bail him out, and I needed to learn that it was okay to let go. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a text from Carter. "Mom, I'm sorry about last night. I should have included you. Vivian ended up paying the bill, but it was a disaster. Can we have dinner together this week? Just you and me." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. Maybe he'd finally learned something. Maybe we both had. I replied, "I'd love that, Carter. Let's keep it simple this time, pizza and a movie at my place." He sent back a thumbs up emoji and a heart, and I knew we'd be okay. We'd both grown a little, learned a little, and come out the other side stronger for it. As I tidied up the living room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, still in my pajamas, hair a mess but with a smile on my face that I hadn't seen in a long time. I realized that sometimes, the best moments in life aren't the ones that go according to plan. Sometimes, they're the ones that catch you off guard, that force you to stand up for yourself, that remind you of your own worth. So, to all the women out there who've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or taken for granted, remember this: you are stronger than you think. You deserve to be celebrated, not just on Mother's Day, but every day. And if life ever hands you a blocked credit card and a ball gown, don't be afraid to laugh, to say no, and to choose yourself. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living your life on your own terms. And as I settled in for another night of Golden Girls reruns, I raised my glass to myself, to my resilience, my humor, and my newfound sense of freedom. Here's to all of us who've learned to let go, to laugh, and to love ourselves just a little bit more. So ladies, have you ever been left out of your own celebration? Or had a family dinner go hilariously wrong? Share your stories in the comments, I'd love to hear them. And if you enjoyed this little slice of my life, don't forget to subscribe for more real, relatable stories. Because at our age, We've earned the right to laugh at life's little surprises,